The Galactic Senate Chamber was a colossal dome of glass and steel that floated in orbit above a burning star, its vast interior filled with the voices of thousands of alien leaders, each representing their species, their empire, their pride, and their fear, and today those voices were united in one purpose: to decide whether humanity deserved a place among the stars or whether Earth's people would be cast aside forever. And as the noise swelled into a storm of accusations, the human delegation sat silently, outnumbered in every direction, their lone representative, Commander Arya Voss, standing tall at the center podium, her uniform black and simple, her eyes sharp and steady as the galaxy's most powerful rulers hurled lies and venom across the chamber. The Drakari Emperor, a reptilian giant draped in golden robes, sneered that humans were too violent to ever join the order, his voice echoing against the steel walls. Another envoy from the insectoid Kether warned that humanity bred too quickly and would consume resources like locusts, while the cold, gray-skinned Varen delegates declared that humans were unstable, driven by emotion rather than logic, and all around the chamber more voices joined in, accusing, condemning, dismissing, and through it all Arya remained still, her jaw tight, her hands resting calmly on the podium as though she had already heard the verdict, and perhaps she had, because deep inside she knew what was coming. Humanity's enemies had plotted for months, whispering lies into the ears of frightened rulers, turning fear into policy, and now the trap had closed. Yet still she did not flinch, not when the towering Speaker of the Senate, a three-headed being whose voices rang in harmony, called for the final vote, not when thousands of lights flashed across the chamber screen, each a decision, each a voice declaring humanity unworthy, and not even when the screen glowed crimson, signaling the overwhelming rejection of Earth's place among the stars, the sound of gasps and cheers clashing together in the air like thunder. For while others looked at Arya with pity or triumph, she did not break. She only let her lips curve into the faintest smile, small, sharp, dangerous, and it was that smile that unsettled those who were watching closely, because though humanity had just been cast out, though they had been branded as dangerous, untrustworthy, and unwanted, Arya did not look defeated. She looked as though the Senate had just confirmed her expectation, as though the decision had not closed a door but opened one, and beyond that door waited something none of them were ready for, because far from the Senate's glittering chamber, at the very edge of the galaxy where the stars grew thin and dark, a small fleet of human ships floated in silence, almost forgotten, their steel hulls scarred from training battles, their engines quiet, their weapons powered but concealed, and on each ship the crews waited without fear, without hesitation, their eyes fixed on the void as if it were not emptiness but a promise, because Arya Voss had sent her last message to them before the vote, and though the galaxy thought humanity weak, though they believed Earth held no power, the men and women aboard those ships knew the truth. They had been prepared for this very moment, they had trained not for peace but for betrayal, and now, with the Senate's decision echoing across the galaxy, the waiting was over. Earth's hand had been forced. And as Arya stood in the chamber with thousands of alien eyes upon her, she bowed her head slightly, a gesture of respect or perhaps of mockery, and then she turned, her boots striking the polished floor with slow, steady steps, her faint smile never fading, and though the Senate had just sealed humanity's fate, they did not yet understand what kind of fate they had chosen, because humanity had always fought hardest when pushed to the edge, and in the silence of space, the fleet stirred, engines humming awake like predators rising from sleep, ready to answer the galaxy's judgment with fire, ready to show that the Senate had made the greatest mistake in history. The Senate chamber was filled with noise after the vote was cast, some alien leaders cheering while others whispered in disbelief. But Commander Arya Voss did not flinch. She stood tall in her black uniform, her hands resting calmly on the silver podium, her face unreadable, only her eyes burning with the quiet fire of someone who knew more than anyone else in that chamber. Because unlike the alien empires who thought humanity had just been crushed with this decision, Arya knew the truth. Humanity was not broken, humanity was waiting. The alien speaker, a tall, insectoid leader with sharp mandibles, slammed a staff on the floor and declared, by decision of the Senate, humanity is denied all rights of protection, their colonies are stripped, their fleets restricted, their future removed, and the sound of approval rose through the chamber. Hundreds of voices calling for human submission, calling for human silence. Arya tilted her head slightly, her lips almost curving, because she saw exactly what she expected. Fear wrapped in arrogance, empires too blind to see the danger they had just unleashed, empires who thought a single vote could bury the will of an entire species. Slowly she turned and walked out, her boots echoing against the polished floor, the guards watching her but not stopping her, because to them she was already powerless, a defeated representative with nothing left to bargain, nothing left to fight for. But Arya carried something none of them understood: time, patience and preparation. Outside the chamber, in the vast crystal corridors of the Senate station, other alien envoys smirked and whispered as she passed, some taunting her, others ignoring her, their arrogance dripping like venom. But Arya never broke her calm stride. She stepped into a private comms room, sealed the door, and activated the encrypted channel, her fingers flying across the console, and a blue hologram shimmered to life, showing Admiral Kale, commander of the hidden human fleet waiting on the edge of the Perseus Arm. "It happened," Arya said simply, her voice cold and steady. "The Senate voted against us, the Empires think we are finished." Kale's face hardened, his eyes narrowing as the lights of his command bridge glowed behind him. "Then the order is clear," he said, his voice deep with restrained fury. "They sealed their fate." Arya nodded once, the faintest flicker of satisfaction crossing her face. "Do not move yet, Admiral. Let them celebrate first, let them believe their victory is secure, and when their guard is down, when they are full of arrogance, that is when humanity will answer." Kale's voice rumbled through the channel. "Understood, Commander, we will wait in the shadows, but when you give the word, the galaxy will know what humans are capable of." Arya closed the channel, her hands tightening slightly as she looked at the stars through the crystal walls of the station, her mind already calculating, already preparing, because she knew this was no longer about survival, it was about showing every empire in that chamber that humanity would never kneel, never submit. Meanwhile, in the hidden corners of the galaxy, the human fleet waited silently, their ships cloaked, their weapons charged, thousands of men and women at their stations, silent but ready, every one of them carrying the same fire as Arya. And as the Senate celebrated inside their shining chambers, none of them realized the shadow of humanity's wrath was already moving, already waiting, and soon the galaxy would remember the vote not as a victory, but as the single mistake that would awaken the fury of mankind. Far from the shining Senate station, in the cold dark edges of the Perseus Arm, the human fleet waited, hidden inside the shadow of a dying star, their ships cloaked in silence, their lights dimmed, their engines cold, only the quiet hum of power flowing through steel veins, ready to awaken at a moment's command. And in the command ship Resolute, Admiral Kale stood at the center of the bridge, his officers watching him with steady eyes, their faces marked not with fear but with determination. Because every man and woman aboard those ships knew what the Senate had done. They had stripped humanity of rights, stripped them of dignity, and now they celebrated, believing humans were beaten, but that arrogance was the greatest weapon humanity would use against them. Kale lifted his hand and the holographic map of the galaxy bloomed before them, glowing points showing the Senate fleets scattered across space, spread thin, unguarded, because why should they defend against humans who were supposedly weak, supposedly finished, and that blindness was exactly why the first strike would be devastating. "Target chosen," Kale said in a low voice, pointing at a system near the Senate's core trade routes, a system defended by 3 fleets of mixed alien warships, ships belonging to empires who had voted against humanity, ships whose commanders now drank in halls of celebration, thinking their decision was final, and Kale's lips tightened into something close to a smile. "We strike there." The officers nodded, no hesitation in their movements, no doubt in their hearts, because humans had prepared for this moment for years, hiding their true power, building weapons in secret, ships designed to move faster, hit harder, and disappear before the enemy even realized they were under attack. "Fleet, awaken," Kale ordered, and across the black sea of space, human ships came alive, their engines burning with blue fire, their hulls glimmering like shadows tearing through the void, and for the first time, the galaxy would see the real strength of Earth's children. Moments later, in the chosen system, alien crews lounged in their stations, some asleep, some drinking, none expecting war, until the first human missiles cut through the silence like falling stars, striking with impossible precision, ripping warships in half before alarms even sounded, and the alien commanders screamed in disbelief, their ships scattering, but there was no escape. The human fleet moved like wolves through a herd, their railguns tearing apart shields, their drones swarming, their strike craft darting faster than any alien had ever seen, and in less than 10 minutes, 3 entire fleets were nothing but fire and wreckage burning in space. Across the galaxy, shockwaves spread as emergency channels lit up with cries of distress, and in the Senate chamber, where leaders were still feasting and drinking to their victory, the alarms cut through the celebration, flashing red across the walls, reports flooding in of devastation, of fleets destroyed in seconds, of a human attack that should not have been possible. The insectoid speaker slammed his staff in rage, mandibles clacking. Impossible, they had no fleet, they had no power. But even as he spoke, the chamber filled with fear, voices rising, arguments breaking out, because the truth was inescapable. Humanity had not been crushed, humanity had been waiting. And somewhere in the shadows, Arya Voss received the first report of Kale's strike, her eyes cold and steady, no triumph in her face, only grim certainty, because this was just the beginning, the first warning, the first sign to the galaxy that the Senate's decision was not a cage for humanity, but a spark that had set fire to the stars. Humanity had struck back, fast, silent, merciless, and now the empires would have to decide. Continue their arrogance and face extinction, or admit the truth they feared most, that humans could not be controlled, humans could not be broken, and once provoked, humans would never stop until the galaxy itself was reshaped. The galaxy burned with rumors after the destruction of the patrol fleet. Whispers spread like fire through markets, military stations, and palace halls. The Senate tried to hide the truth, but fragments of data, broken transmissions, and frightened witnesses carried the story. The patrol fleet had been annihilated by humans. No survivors. No escape. For the first time in centuries, the old empires felt fear. They had crushed countless species before, yet this small, young race had struck back with precision. In the Grand Chamber, alien leaders shouted at each other, blaming rivals, accusing spies, demanding more fleets to be sent. Panic was in the air, though no one wanted to admit it. Humanity had been underestimated, and now the consequences were becoming real. Commander Arya Voss watched silently from her post on the human flagship. She knew the fear was only beginning. Her fleet was small, but every ship carried weapons no alien had ever seen. Humans had not wasted time building empires. They had studied, adapted, and prepared for war that might one day come. That day had arrived. Yet Arya did not rush. She was patient, and patience was something the galaxy did not understand. Far across the stars, the Senate called for emergency war meetings. They deployed fleets to Earth's borders, trying to cage humanity before it could expand. But Earth itself had been ready for decades. Hidden bases on the moon, silent stations in the asteroid belt, and war factories buried deep in the oceans had been waiting. Civilians went underground while soldiers moved quietly into their positions. Humanity's leaders gave no speeches, no threats. They let the aliens believe they still had control. This silence was its own kind of weapon, one that unsettled the empires. For alien species used to domination, the humans' calm behavior was far more terrifying than anger. On the Senate floor, the most powerful voices demanded action. "They are still weak," cried the SYTH governor, his armored frame towering over the assembly. "Strike now and erase them before their fire spreads." But other leaders hesitated. The loss of the patrol fleet was not only a defeat, it was humiliation. How could a primitive race destroy ships of the Senate's elite navy? Fear made some argue for caution. Others suspected betrayal, claiming rival empires secretly armed humans for advantage. The chamber descended into chaos. Every word proved what Arya already knew. The Senate was crumbling under its own arrogance. They thought the vote had sealed humanity's fate, but in truth, it sealed their own. Meanwhile, in hidden sectors of space, human fleets began to move. They did not travel in massive armadas that could be easily seen. They split into small units, slipping through shadows, using gravity wells, and hiding inside asteroid fields. Each fleet carried only what it needed, fast, deadly, and silent. Their mission was not to conquer, but to dismantle. Strike the supply lines. Destroy the fuel depots. Shatter communication networks. While the Senate screamed in its chamber, human fleets quietly cut the ropes that held its power together. No one expected it. No one believed a species so new could understand galactic warfare better than those who ruled for millennia. But humans had studied history with hungry eyes. Every mistake, every collapse of empire, every failed war, they had learned from it. Now, they turned that knowledge against the ones who mocked them. In the Senate chamber, rumors of vanished convoys started to arrive. Entire trade routes went dark. War factories on the edge of the galaxy stopped sending shipments. Some suspected pirates, others claimed rebels. But then evidence surfaced: human ships were responsible. Shock spread. How could such a small race strike across so many systems? The Senate could no longer hide the truth. Fear grew into anger. Orders were sent for massive retaliation fleets, tens of thousands of ships to march toward Earth. Yet before those fleets could even leave their stations, fuel depots exploded, docking yards were left in ruins, and key admirals vanished, never seen again. The more the Senate tried to rise, the faster it was pulled down. Humanity's shadow war was working. Arya stood on her command deck as reports came in. Her officers, young but sharp, kept their voices calm. No cheers, no celebrations. Every strike was only one step in a long path. The Senate still believes they can win, one officer said. Arya's eyes narrowed. That belief will destroy them. She turned to the stars. She knew this was not only about fleets and battles. It was about the story the galaxy told itself. For centuries, the Senate believed it was eternal, untouchable. Now, humanity was showing that nothing was eternal. Empires fall, even the greatest. And when they fall, the galaxy remembers not their strength, but their weakness. In deep space, the retaliation fleets finally gathered, massive beyond imagination. Whole star systems shook under the weight of their engines. Billions watched from across the galaxy, waiting for humanity to be erased. But Arya knew the truth. Numbers did not win wars, strategy did. The fleets were large, but they were clumsy, dependent on old tactics. Humanity was faster, sharper, and more united. The Senate thought they were hunting humans, but in truth, they were walking into a trap. And Arya was ready to close it. The galaxy trembled as the first images of the battle spread across every channel, every starport, every screen in the Senate's worlds, because what they saw was not a desperate human defense but a counterattack so sharp and precise that entire fleets were ripped apart in seconds. And now the panic spread from the edges of the battlefield to the hearts of empires that had voted against humanity, because they realized their armies were next, and in the chaos the Senate chamber itself descended. Into madness, leaders screaming, pointing claws, tendrils and hands at each other, blaming one another for pushing too hard, for underestimating humanity, for believing the lies that had been repeated for centuries about humans being weak, fragile, and naive. But the truth was unfolding in real time, and the truth was worse than any of them imagined, because humans were not only fighting with new weapons, they were fighting with something that no machine, no empire, no algorithm could counter. Unpredictability. Human fleets broke formation, feigned retreat, and then appeared where no one thought possible, slipping through cracks in enemy lines, tearing down battleships from the inside, while smaller human strike teams boarded massive alien dreadnoughts, moving like shadows, leaving destruction behind. On the floor of the Senate, Ambassador Kethros of the Dreylock Empire shouted, "We must stop them now before they rise beyond control," but his words fell flat because even his own allies could see the truth, that humanity had already risen, and nothing in the galaxy could push them down again. Commander Arya Voss stood in the chamber, silent, as chaos erupted around her, her faint smile returning as she activated a small hollow device on her wrist that displayed a live feed of the battle, showing alien ships collapsing into fire, showing human ships diving like hawks through the wreckage, and when the senators turned their eyes to her, she finally spoke, her voice sharp and clear, cutting through the noise like a blade. "You wanted us destroyed. You voted for our extinction. Now you will see what extinction truly means." Her words spread across the chamber like wildfire, and many senators froze, their blood cold, because they understood. Humanity was not simply fighting for survival, they were fighting for dominance, and the Senate had given them the perfect reason to unleash everything they had. Outside, in the far stars, human reinforcements arrived. Not the tiny fleet everyone expected, but hundreds more ships hidden in dark zones for years, cloaked in silence, waiting for the day humanity would need them. Every empire that had mocked Earth now realized the truth too late. Humans had never been unprepared, they had been waiting, biding their time, building in secret, and now the galaxy's mistake was complete. Panic became despair, despair became silence, and as more alien fleets crumbled under the relentless assault, Whispers grew in the Senate that perhaps the only way to survive was not to fight humanity but to kneel before them, because already rumors spread of worlds surrendering, alien citizens rising in rebellion against their leaders, saying they would rather side with the humans who fought with courage than with the empires who ruled with fear. Commander Voss watched it all unfold, her calm eyes never leaving the senators who had voted against her people, and she said softly, almost as if to herself but loud enough for the chamber to hear, "The galaxy wanted us gone. Instead, we will remain. And when the dust clears, it is not humanity that will beg for mercy." The chamber fell silent, her words lingering like a death sentence, while in the stars the flames of broken fleets painted the darkness with light. The Senate chamber had never known such silence, the air heavy with the weight of collapsing empires and burning fleets, the holograms above their heads flickering with images of battles lost in real time, worlds surrendering, flags of old alliances torn down by their own people who no longer believed in leaders that had led them into ruin, and in that silence Commander Arya Voss stood alone, the only human in a room of thousands, her calm presence more terrifying than any fleet, because everyone in that room finally understood the truth. They were no longer the masters of the galaxy, humanity was, and it had happened not through numbers or wealth but through something more dangerous. Will, the unshakable determination to survive no matter the cost, and as the senators squirmed in their seats, sweating, trembling, clicking mandibles and curling tails, one of them finally broke, Senator Drawl of the Jeune Collective, his voice high and panicked as he cried out, "We must beg for peace. We must kneel before them before we are wiped out." But his words triggered a storm, others shouting that kneeling would mean slavery, that surrender meant humiliation, that humanity would show no mercy after what had been done to them, and the chamber erupted into chaos again, voices rising, but then the lights dimmed and the chamber doors sealed with a sound like thunder, and every senator turned in fear as a single massive projection lit up the entire hall, Earth itself, blue and green, spinning slowly, and a voice, steady and calm, filled the room, not Voss's voice, but the voice of Admiral Elias Ward, Supreme Commander of the Earth Defense Alliance, his face worn, scarred, but his eyes alive with fire. "This is the will of humanity," he declared, his words echoing so strongly that they seemed to shake the chamber walls. "You tried to erase us. You called us weak. You voted for our extinction. But we are still here. And we are not leaving." Gasps spread across the chamber as he continued, his voice cutting into their hearts like steel. "You asked what humans are. You thought we were prey. But we are hunters. We are builders. We are survivors. And from this day forward, you will never forget it. The age of your empires is over. The age of humanity has begun." Silence followed his declaration, heavy and final, broken only by the distant rumble of explosions echoing from the battlefields above them, and in that moment the senators realized they were trapped, not by weapons but by truth. There was no future without humanity, no galaxy without Earth's shadow falling over it, and many of them lowered their eyes in shame, others in rage, but none dared to speak, because they knew Admiral Ward was right. Commander Voss stepped forward then, her footsteps slow and deliberate, her eyes sweeping across the chamber, and she said the final words that sealed the fate of the galaxy. "Kneel or burn. Choose now." And one by one, senators began to fall to their knees, some with pride broken, others with hatred still burning, but all with the same truth carved into their souls, that humanity had risen, unstoppable, unbreakable, and the galaxy would never be the same again. Outside, the stars burned with the wreckage of fallen fleets, and in the quiet that followed, a new dawn began, not for the empires that had ruled for centuries, but for the humans who had been mocked as fragile, who had been underestimated, and who had now taken their place as masters of the galaxy. And so it was written, whispered first in fear and then in awe across every world, every station, every ship. The galaxy laughed at humanity, but in the end, humanity had the last laugh.